Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Let's Talk Purity podcast with Brittany and Richard Mora. This has been an incredible month. It has been the whole love month. We've talked about singleness, we've
Mm.
talked dating, we've talked marriage, and today we are going to talk all things sex. And we
Let's
brought on
go.
an amazing couple that I would call sexperts. Like they are just they know the field of sex. They're incredible, so knowledgeable. Dave and Ashley Willis from XO Marriage. They're also the host of the Naked Marriage podcast. So I'm so excited to have you both on. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, we're honored to be here. Thanks for
Yeah,
having us.
honored. Thanks for having us, guys.
Of
You're
course.
welcome.
Thank you. So, we just kind of want to get right into it. We have a lot of questions about sex with our ministry. The first question that I would love to start off with is what does the Bible say about sex?
Oh, yeah.
You want to start?
Well, I mean, the Bible says that sex is actually a gift from God that He created specifically for married couples. And
Mhm.
I think that's something that a lot of people in the church forget to ask. And so I'm glad you guys start out with that question
Yeah.
because a lot of us grew up where we weren't really sure that sex was God's idea or that sex was a good thing. And so
Mm.
one of the things we like to do on the Naked Marriage podcast is really get down to the truth of what the Bible says. And sex is a beautiful gift. I mean, people say the Bible's boring. I'm like, well, have you ever read Song of Solomon? It's pretty steamy
Right.
Hey,
between a
yes.
husband and a wife, and it's beautiful about the pursuit of one another, even the sexual pursuit of one another, and the beauty of that. And so, sex, is awesome, and
Yeah.
it should be something celebrated. And the thing about it though is because God created it for marriage, there are boundaries around sex, obviously. And that's not to make it less exciting, but that's really to keep it as the holy act that it's meant to be between a husband and wife. And so, yeah, that's why we want to talk about it a lot.
Yeah. It's a gift, and God is awesome, and God made it, and
Right.
when it's done the right way, it's a great gift for married couples.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what would you guys say a healthy sex life looks like between a married couple?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Hmm.
I would say it would mean the marriage bed is the safest place on earth for both the husband and the wife.
Mm,
It's a
I love
place
that.
where they both feel protected and cherished and respected and adored and served and pursued, and all of those things happening at once. And if there's a power dynamic that's happening in the marriage, especially in the sexual aspect of the relationship, where one spouse is being manipulative or coercive or trying to kind of force their agenda and make sex very one-sided, very self-centered, then that sabotages the whole gift of oneness that God's created in sex. But when a husband and wife are both committed to adoring each other, serving each other, connecting with one another, the sexual experience within marriage, it provides a lot of freedom, a lot of
Yeah.
exploration, and a lot of fun. I mean, it should be fun. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong, right? I mean, it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
But I think that there've been so many counterfeit messages that we get along the way, just from culture and from entertainment, that we have to sort of detox from some of that to like rediscover God's beautiful plan for sex, which is something better than anything Hollywood could come up with.
True.
Yeah, that's so good. I feel like with like culture, you get one side of like sexual liberation, you can do whatever you want, and then I've heard on the other side that well, sex is only for procreating. Like,
Right.
why would you use birth control if you're trying to procreate? And I'm like, do you guys really like? There's actually people that really believe that.
Yeah.
But on that note, like, what would you guys say if there is maybe one spouse that is withholding sex for whatever reason? Some of the stories that we get is like the male withholds because maybe he's watching porn and so
Yeah.
sex doesn't fulfill him anymore, or like the woman is withholding because she doesn't feel valued, or maybe she's offended. Like, what
Yeah.
would you say to one like whichever partner that may be like withholding sex from their partner?
Yeah, I mean, we hear about those dynamics quite a bit too. And I would say, sex isn't meant to be manipulative or weaponized. Like it's not even meant to be a reward either. And when we are
Yeah.
withholding, we're using it in that way. And that's really not what God designed sex to be. It talks about the only time it talks about not withholding, but really kind of abstaining, each partner both agreeing to abstain from sex for a certain amount of time is for a short amount of time for the sake of like fasting from sex, just to reflect on the Lord. That's the only time the Bible
Yeah.
mentions that. But other
And
than that, it
that
says,
has to be mutual.
right, it's
That can't be like
mutual.
forced
Yeah,
by one spouse saying we need to do this. It's both spouses a short amount of time
right.
committing to like a very specific season of praying through
Prayer and
something
fasting. Yeah,
and then coming back together quickly.
right.
But the
Mhm.
dynamic that you're describing, which is so common sadly,
Yeah.
where it's punishment, it's reward, it's one pulling away because they're meeting that need in some other way through masturbation or porn or whatever else. That's sadly too common.
It is too common. And
Mhm.
like, it says specifically in the Bible that we are not supposed to withhold. In fact,
Yeah.
because, we are the only legitimate place as a husband and wife, we're the only legitimate place to fulfill sexual need. We're not supposed to
Mm.
fulfill it on our own. We're not supposed to go outside of our marriage to fulfill it, whether through pornography or through other people. And so, it's important that we don't hold that back from each other, because really, then we're really opening ourselves up to temptation as well as our spouse. And I think
Mm.
that when people are withholding, they're certainly not thinking about that. And I understand, like, I totally have, you know, I can understand that sometimes, a woman or a man can feel unloved and they don't feel like having sex. And they're like, we're not communicating well. I don't feel like having sex, or they don't feel like the marriage bed is safe. And those are things you do have to work through. But the longer you withhold from each other, the more you're really leaving room for the enemy to come between you and to start
So
messing with your
good.
mind. And it all starts right here in the mind. And so it's important that we get to the root of what's going on between us. And really, great sex doesn't start in the bedroom. It starts outside of the bedroom. It's all those things you say to each other,
Yeah.
and all the intimacy through communication that you're doing that leads to having this beautiful sexual experience on the physical and emotional level inside the bedroom. And so, we need to make sure that our minds and our hearts are in the right place, and stop kind of playing these games with each other, because it doesn't lead anywhere good. And in fact, it leads to more disconnection. And sex is all about connection. It's all about intimacy. And so it's important that we talk about it, and we don't just keep on withholding, and then just kind of wonder and assume, what the other is doing.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
so good.
I love that. That's actually really good. And actually, I love that you said that, intimacy starts outside of the bedroom.
Mhm.
So, what are some practical ways that, say somebody's watching and they're saying, like, okay, what are some practical ways that I can do to serve and be better outside of the bedroom, intimacy wise? Like, what would be some practical things would you suggest?
Yeah. I mean, I think, man, whenever we've met with married couples and there is a wife who doesn't really want to have sex, like she's like, you know what, I just have a low libido, and the
Mm.
man is sexually starved. I'm telling you, like, literally 90% of the time, it's because, there's not been there's not been really good healthy communication. It's like the man's not willing to have a conversation, and so that the woman is shutting down sexually. And the
Uh-huh.
more, a man can be willing to listen and willing to talk, and the woman can share her heart, the more the woman feels physically close to her husband, and then naturally wants to be romantic with him.
Mm.
And so I would
Mm.
say, start with conversation. And I'm not talking about
Yeah.
shop talk. All of us in this conversation have kids. We get that you can get in that habit of having, what shop top, what do I mean by that? But just like, where the kids go, what are we doing for
Yeah.
work today, what's for dinner, what things need to be fixed at the house, like those things need to be discussed. But that's not gonna get you closer together, right? That's just
Yeah,
being kind of
exactly.
business partners. And so it's
Yeah.
important that you talk about your hopes and your dreams and your the things that are really going on in your heart and your mind. And that's why we're big advocates of putting kids to bed earlier than maybe other people do, because then that gives you
Hey,
Wow,
come
time.
on.
that's
Yes,
good.
I know. It gives you time as a married couple. And I hear people say, but oh, my kids don't like it. And I'm like, of course they don't like it. When I was a
Yep.
kid, I didn't like it either. But it's like, they don't understand that their parents need time. And I would even
Mm.
say, tell your kids, like, it's mommy daddy time, because this is reinforcing the importance of marriage and the importance
Mhm.
of your relationship. And then I'm telling you, having like 30 minutes to an hour, that
Yep.
can go a long way, where you really,
Yes.
have these important conversations, where you laugh together, you talk together, you pray together, and just have that time where you can really build each other's spirit, and feel like you really know this person. Because I think a lot of times people become sexually distant in their marriage because they feel like they don't know the person they're married to anymore. But
Yeah,
really,
that's
True.
good.
it's up to us to be intentional to get to know each other, because if we're not, everyone and everything else will take precedence in our life, and it'll kind of
Mm.
rule our life. So we've got to be the adults that we are, and make sure we're putting time together on the calendar, that we are being intentional about really investing in the relationship.
That's so good. And what would you say to somebody that maybe genuinely does have a lower libido? Like I know I've gone through seasons after like with nursing or
Oh yeah.
when I went through some hormonal imbalances and things like that. But I still personally made sex a priority because I wouldn't want to withhold that from my spouse. So like, but what advice might you give? I have had like a guy a few times message, well, like my wife doesn't want to have sex, so that's why I watch porn. How
Oh.
would you advise the woman that has the low libido and the man that uses porn, her low libido as an excuse
Mm.
to watch
Mhm.
porn?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, yeah, and it creates a vicious cycle when we start justifying our own bad decisions because of something that our spouse is doing. It creates this vortex
Mhm.
where nobody wins. And so I would say in that situation for the guy that's watching porn, as a guy myself who, early in our marriage, from my teenage years into early adulthood, this was a struggle I had. I was in that selfish cycle of watching porn, masturbating, having this just very kind of sinful, broken view of
Mm.
sex and of myself. And um, so I understand it. I understand the temptation. I understand how hard it is to break away from that. But I also understand that nothing good, like literally nothing good, comes from it. And I love that you two talk so openly about it and just helping people see just the dark side of this whole world that has been so kind of widely accepted, even among a lot of Christians. But it's devastating to the mind, the heart, the marriage. And I think that in the short term, we feel like, no, I'm meeting a need or I'm spicing things up, but
Yep.
it's toxic and everything about it's toxic. Everything about it's going to hurt you. So when you're going to that, what you're doing is you're sabotaging the intimacy in your relationship. You're training yourself to be a very self-focused lover by looking at
Yeah.
sex and people as objects. That's going to bleed over into your marriage. You're going to start seeing your spouse as an object. You're going to start seeing your spouse in those kind of ways. So nothing good can come from it. There's nothing your spouse could do that would make you looking at porn okay, because sin is sin.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
Yeah.
so with that being said, the spouse that's like withholding sex, they might not have the drive, they might not have um, the energy, but I would say actively look for solutions. Actively
Mhm.
look for, well, if it's hormones, let's get the hormones checked. And
Yep.
there's
Yep.
so many solutions, medical, other and otherwise related to that. And
Mhm.
we've benefited from
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
ultimately, Brittany, it's what you said earlier. It's like even in those moments when we aren't always, there are going to be so many times in marriage where we need to be willing to step outside of ourselves
Yeah.
to help serve our spouse, and not just with sex but really in everything. I mean, imagine, like, think of all the things that you do for young kids when you become a parent, when you
Mhm.
don't feel like it ever. You don't feel like, getting out of bed and changing a diaper. You don't feel like getting up and
It's so true.
being interrupted, but we do it because it's like, no, that's what they need, and I'm the only one who can meet
Yeah.
that need. And so it's in some ways a privilege, even though it's exhausting, to do it. And in marriage, we just stop thinking that way. We're like, no, if I don't feel like talking to my spouse, I'm not going to talk to him. If I don't feel like
Yeah.
doing this chore that would make their life easier, I'm not going to load the dishwasher because it's not my turn, even though I know it would really help them. And then with sex, people get really defensive the moment you even hint that, even when you don't feel like it, there are times when the best thing you can do is say, this is an opportunity to step outside of how I'm feeling right now, because I know we need to connect in this way. I know that this is a need
Yeah.
that my spouse has. And one of the best things we can do for our marriage is for me to just meet this need. And now, if
Yeah.
it always looks like that, if it's like you always feel like you're having to just serve sexually, and it's never this
Reciprocal.
thing where
Yeah.
you're equally excited about it, then yeah, then get to the root of why. Is it that your husband's not communicating enough? Is it that the hormones are off? Is it that you need
Yeah.
more sleep? I mean, what is it? And then let
Yeah.
him know what he can do to help serve you, to put you in a place where you can best enjoy it too, because God wants it to be mutually enjoyable.
Hey guys, we have a brief interruption. First, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this video is blessing you. And if it is, make sure to press the subscribe button and also press like and drop a comment below. Britt and I, we read every single one of these comments, and I know it's going to bless us.
Second is, you guys, we are in need if you want to partner with our ministry, lovealwaysministries.com. We need financial support to continue recording these videos, but also because we are really trying to make waves and raise awareness of the harmful effects of the adult film industry. Also, we're trying to help OnlyFans models and adult stars transition out of the industry. And so we need your help. If you could make a one-time or monthly donation at lovealwaysministries.com/donate, it would be such a big help. We love you guys and we appreciate you. Let's get back to the video.
I think that's so good, especially just getting to the root of the problem. And, you guys talked a little bit about porn. Dave, Ashley, oftentimes in our ministry, people say, well, we watch porn, or I try to watch porn because I wanted to spice up our marriage, and I want to watch porn for sexual education so I can learn some new moves in the bedroom. I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, that's really affecting y'all. But what would you say to somebody that wants to spice up their marriage, who wants to have their marriage, hot and on fire, and they're looking for ways to spice it up and not using the porn route? What
Yeah.
would you say to somebody like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. I understand the curiosity and wanting to connect on a deeper level and in a more fun way.
Yep.
I think exploring different positions is great, but I do think you have to be very, very careful where you go. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we hear from couples too that really were looking at porn for that, like for education, because there's no
Yeah.
one in their life they can talk to. They don't know where to go, and they end up really with a porn habit because of
Yes.
it. And so there's actually we have some videos on YouTube where we look through some of these cards, but there's actually a Christian company, and they have these cards that are stick figures that do all these different variety of positions. Have you all heard of this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No,
Okay.
no.
It's called Christian
Yeah,
sex
they were fun
positions.
videos to
It
make
was so fun.
because we laughed
Christian.
and laughed because a lot of
Awesome.
I think we called it
Yes.
Christian sex, but really like
I think it's called Christian sex
all
positions.
positions can be Christian sex positions,
Of
really. But
course.
Yeah,
Of
yeah,
it
course.
was
yeah, yeah.
it was
But that's,
that
I think, what the cards are
it was just
called.
like a little pink stick figure and a blue stick figure and all these different
Variety, like
variety of
wide
positions.
variety.
And a lot of
Yes.
them look anatomically impossible because no one's that flexible, that kind of stuff. And
It doesn't actually show parts or
we would
anything,
joke
but,
about like nobody does enough yoga to make that move. But then a lot of it, it's
but it
like
could be a goal.
right, it could be a goal.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we laugh about it, but it's just instructional. It's like, okay, here's something you could try. Because
Yeah.
I think people that were maybe raised in purity culture, maybe have hangups or insecurities about
Yep.
sex, or maybe they they feel this shame over their sexual past, even though
Sure. Yeah.
shame's of Satan, not of God. God sets us free. We're new creations. But whatever the hangups might be, I think it's like they feel guilty to enjoy sex, or
Right.
or to explore it, and so they're like, well, we'll do this, but I'm just going to have to like lay still and lifeless.
Yes.
And
oh,
that's
yeah.
never God's intent. Like he
Right.
wants
Yeah.
you to enjoy this and to connect, and for there to be passion and connection and intimacy on all levels. And yeah, it doesn't have to be mechanical. It doesn't have to be just, the same one position. You can have fun with it.
And you can laugh. Like, I feel like, we've been married 22 years. We've been through some changes already, like with having kids. Dave went through a low testosterone time. You kind of have to have a sense of humor when it comes to sex. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
talking with
Yeah.
couples who've been married, 40, 50, 60 years, the ones that are still, they're keeping it hot, so to speak, they'll tell you, they're like, we've had some funny moments, but dang, we try to do all kinds of different positions and keep it exciting. And sometimes, we might need a chair, or we might need to do different things to kind of ease our back pain or whatever, or knee pain or whatever. But I'm like, to me, it like, and I know none of us think that way,
Yeah.
but to me, I'm like, how sweet. Like, it's just so sweet to know each other in on such a deep level, to be able to have a sense of humor
You
about
go
it.
from over time, you go from like KY jelly to icy hot.
That's
Somehow like
right.
that.
There you
Like,
go.
That's
you're having to like
hilarious.
rub down your joints. Like I'm
You're
sore.
preparing.
I'm
You're
yeah.
doing stretches.
Got to rub Bengay on my joints.
That's right.
And it's
Be
like
careful though, that'll burn the wrong area.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to be careful where you put that. That's
Exactly.
true. But I'm saying, I do think, I love that you asked that question, because I think that there are, be careful where you look, but know that there are things. I mean, there's a book called Sheet Music. It's been out a really long time. I think it's by Dr. Lehman. There's, there's information out there from Christian sources where it's not full of shame at all. It's just really informative, and it's not pornographic. I think you just have to be really careful with that.
That's so good. I like that you brought up shame. Oftentimes we hear this question when they're in their bedroom with their partner. One person might be afraid of being naked, and they're shameful, and they like to turn off the lights and do that. What would you say to somebody who's battling shame with that area? Like, how could we help them out in that area to feel a little bit more comfortable when the lights are turned on?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Well, we've got some like videos and I think even podcast episodes on like how to enjoy sex when you don't like your body.
Mm-hmm.
Because almost everybody has some level of insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's like it's physical insecurity, performance anxiety, and like Ashley was saying, with time, our bodies are changing, and there's just all of that. I would say a couple things. First off, to women, no matter what you think about your body, how insecure you might be, chances are high that your husband loves your body.
Yeah.
Like,
Amen.
is just
Yes.
And
absolutely
all the changes too.
enamored,
Yes.
wants to see it more
Mm-hmm.
often. And so when you're like covering up around him all the time, um, you're denying an opportunity of connection because he is so drawn to you.
Come
God
on.
wired him up to
Come
just
on.
love your shape. And
Come
so,
on. Show it off.
um, yeah, so just walk in that confidence,
Yeah.
and if you're still feeling like kind of uncomfortable, a few little tricks, like you don't have to have like the
The
harsh
full light. Yeah.
halogen like dressing room lights on you where nobody looks good in it. Get some dimmer light,
Or get
get
candlelight.
some candlelight that's a little
Woo! Get those
flickering.
candles out, y'all.
Right, it's
That's
it's
right.
romantic. It accentuates all the right features. You can still see each other, but
Come
part of
on.
the connection is in being able to see each other. And so if
Mm-hmm.
it's just pitch black every time, you're denying yourselves an important aspect of it.
Yeah. No, I had a dear friend of mine. I remember that for probably 10 years of their marriage, she just did not feel good about her body. And her husband has always loved her body, but she wanted pitch black and she would wear a shirt like during sex. And she said
Wow.
it took her a long time to just believe her husband when he said, I love your body. They've had kids, and it's like that just kind of
Wow.
perpetuated that belief that her body wasn't beautiful. And he's like, listen, I love all of it. Like, I mean, and your body did this amazing thing by bringing children into the world, and by just, and he's like, and you're my, this body holds my favorite person, inside of this body. And he's like, why would, please let me, see you, because I love your body. And she said it really was like she had to believe him in that. And also it's a level of trust. People
Yeah.
underestimate trust in marriage. I mean, it takes tremendous trust to really have true
Absolutely.
intimacy. And or I mean, people underestimate trust in sex is what I meant to say, because I think that, we think about all these things, and we think, we're forgetting that trust plays this huge role in it, because I mean, you're being so vulnerable on every level, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so it's a highly vulnerable time. And so we need to believe our spouse when they say, oh, you're beautiful. But we also need to remember what we say really sticks. Like, I would just
Yeah.
say to both spouses listening, I mean, be really careful what you might say to your spouse when it comes to their appearance and when it comes to their performance, because even if you're joking, sometimes those things can be taken the wrong way. And so just be really careful with that. And if you mess it up, really apologize, because it's, we're very vulnerable in this area.
Amen.
Yeah, that's really good too. And I mean, I can relate to that coming from like just childhood trauma of like
Mm,
having one parent be so obsessed with body and then comparing, my shape to to my siblings and stuff like that. So that's
mm.
something too, like, and I know a lot of people have gone through that. If you've gone through that, that really just takes like the inward work and healing from the Holy Spirit to
Amen.
be
It
able to
does.
like see yourself in a different light and trust that your spouse is actually being honest when he says he loves your body, because
Yeah.
that may not have been the language that you heard growing up.
Yep.
So,
So
okay,
true.
let's move on here. Is there anything off topic or off limits, I should say, in the bedroom, in the marriage bedroom?
That's a great
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So,
many good questions.
so many. You guys are great with these questions. So, is anything off limits? And this is a question that we get. I'm sure people have asked you this as well.
Yep.
Um, so, I always tell people, listen, I'm not the referee in anybody's bedroom. Like, I'm not going to get a whistle and a striped shirt and jump in and call fouls.
But some
But
people do. Some
I
people
know
do
Yes,
some
they
people
do.
do.
Yes, they do.
But I
You
will
know,
say, I will say that God's word does, I think, give some clear and healthy parameters. And like number one, I think talking about the marriage bed being the safest place, I think both spouses need to feel safe. Both
Mhm.
spouses need to feel loved and adored. I think obviously there's no room for anyone else to enter into that dynamic. There's no room for either virtually or in person someone else coming in and disrupting that oneness that God intended couples to have. So that means no swinging, no
Yeah.
threesomes, and it also means no porn, because
Yeah.
when we're bringing porn into the marriage bed, then digitally, virtually, we're inviting those other people
Yeah.
into our marriage bed,
Right.
and that's that's out of bounds. I would say don't hurt each other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say don't try to coerce each other. Like if you're just constantly pressuring your spouse, like really pressuring them to do some act that is going to ultimately cause them pain, or you're going to derive pleasure from pain, and they're not into it, but they finally just sort of give in and reluctantly agree. Like I think, yeah, even though you technically have consent, that's not the
It's not
spirit of
loving.
what
Yeah.
what the marriage bed should be. So while you should have freedom to explore and have fun um and really just get creative. I mean, God's a
Yeah.
God of creativity, and he's the one that made sex, and you guys should be able to explore and get creative. But if that creativity is leading you to a place where you're bringing in, again, kind of some of those outside forces or
Right.
causing pain, I would say, like, all right, it's a timeout. That's
Yeah.
a call a foul on that.
Or even causing mental anguish. Sometimes we get written by people that have trauma in their past associated
Yeah.
with certain sexual acts, and it
Mhm.
just is triggering to them,
Yeah.
even to do that with their spouse at certain points. And so,
Yeah.
I think as a spouse, it's more about our spouse's well-being than our own pleasure. And so obviously
Mm.
don't force your spouse to do something. Like, it may not technically hurt them physically, but it may really hurt them emotionally and mentally. And so we have to really take that into account. And I think too, I would tell people, really pray about your sex life. Like, sometimes people are so weirded out by that, but I'm like, God created sex. Why would we
Yeah.
not pray about it? And I think if there's something where you're not sure, you're like, I don't know if how I feel about this particular act that we want to do together, really pray about it. And he's going to either give you peace about it, or he's going to, tell you maybe not. Maybe
Yeah.
that's not a good idea.
But if you never want to do anything,
Yeah.
then you have to get to the root of why. Like
Like, what
why
is it? Yeah.
like if why do you not want to explore anything?
Mhm.
Not to shame,
Yeah.
don't ever shame the spouse that's wanting to be more adventurous, and don't shame the spouse that's being more reserved, but really try to get to the root. If the more
Yeah.
adventurous spouse, it's like it's always got to be something new all the time,
Mhm.
then it might make the more reserved spouse think, well, are you getting all these ideas? Am I not? Is this
Right. Where are you getting these
where all?
ideas?
Yeah, is this being fueled from porn or from, like, where's all this kind? It might make them a little bit insecure. But if you're the one that's always saying no, like, I don't want to try this, I don't want to try that, and you're shutting your spouse off and you're immediately shutting things down, then it might make them feel like you're not wanting
Right,
to
right. Not wanting
really
to
connect and
connect.
to
Yeah.
explore with them. So you got to find that balance together. And like almost everything else in marriage, it takes communication, patience, mutual respect, and two people willing to really serve each other.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
That's really
So
good.
good.
Another question. I know Britt brought up the question about like a healthy sex life, but like, what would like when it comes to I'm trying to reword this question, like frequency, like would it be like what does that look like in a healthy sex life? Would it be like once a week, twice a week, once a month? Like what does a healthy sex like look like that in regards of like when you do it?
Well, we get
Oh,
asked that a lot too.
that is probably everybody's favorite question. I wish we had the magic formula. You know, I think it's gonna vary couple to couple. I mean, the main thing is it needs to be regular. Like, it needs to be happening regularly. Don't go for long periods of time without having sex. I think that's gonna put distance between you. But I would say regularly. I mean, like, Dave has always said too, usually in marriage, there's one spouse with a higher libido than the other spouse. And so, like, aim, for the higher libido spouse, like, kind of having it more regularly. But if you can't get there, at least, like, even mark on a calendar, how can we know that, okay, we're going to have sex every other day? So we're going to make sure that's a minimum. And then if we get to do it more, awesome. But we want to make sure that we're having
Yeah.
it regularly, or maybe it's every 3 days. It's going to look different for every couple. But
Yes.
we've met couples, some that do it every single day, some that do it twice a day. I mean, so it's just going
But
to be
then there are a
different.
lot of
I'm
couples
having
that
a-
don't. I want to know what supplements they're on, but
Yes, yes.
there are other
Yeah.
couples that go
I was
long
about to
stretches and don't
yeah.
have sex. And I would
Right.
say, if you're both healthy, like if you're in a season where you're both physically able, you're capable, you're healthy, and you're not having sex at least once a week, then I would say let's like really get to the root of why. Like
Yeah.
let's talk about why there isn't consistency. Because because I would say like less, and these are all subjective numbers, but I would say less than once a week is not consistent. Like you're not being
Right.
consistent. And so why aren't we being consistent? Like why are we allowing so much time to go? What's the deal, and what would it look like for us to have more, and what's
Yeah.
holding us back from that, without being accusing and without
Sure.
like pointing fingers. But it's a glue that God created to help hold couples together. And if we're
Yeah.
not if we're not leaning into that part of our marriage, then the whole marriage eventually is going to weaken as a result.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's so good. And another positive, they said that if your sex life, if you average 6 minutes of sex, you lose 21 calories, you guys. So,
There you
you
Nice.
know,
It's a
go.
there
calorie
you go.
burner.
Orgasm and calories,
I
right?
love it.
Let's
Burn
hit
some
the
calories.
gym, babe.
I know who needs a gym.
Yeah.
Let's
That
go to
that
the
could be
toilet.
like code language, like you can have code language like, "Sweetie, you wanna
I
go burn
love
some
that.
calories?" And the kids don't know, but you know.
Exactly.
That's gonna be our new coin
Yeah.
phrase. We gotta get. I mean, they're gonna eventually get to the point
I
where they
love
know
it.
what
There you go.
Freaky Friday means. So we're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
have to switch it to calorie burner nights.
Yeah.
I love
Burn some
it. I love it.
Okay, I have a real curveball question for y'all. So, on our ministry, we do talk a lot about, purity. We talk about purity culture.
Sure.
But I got a random question, and I think this is so good. Like, this person asked, well, what if I wait for my partner, and when we get married, he's horrible in the bedroom,
Or vice
Mm.
versa.
or vice
Yeah,
versa?
Well,
Like,
yeah.
that's how we feel, right?
yeah, what do
Yes.
I do then? It's like, yeah, I
Right.
mean, let's go, and then, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, this was the
Yeah.
worst. Like, what would you say
Well,
to that person?
I think
Yeah.
I'm not surprised by that question. I think that some of the enemy's most effective lies to lead people into sin, and this has always been his game plan,
Mhm.
is that well, you need to do this because otherwise you're missing out. Like you're
Hey,
missing out,
yeah.
and the God's not doesn't really have something good for you. And
Mm,
that was the very first lie to Adam and Eve. Did God really
Yeah.
say? Because really, if you would just eat that fruit, it's awesome, and you're
Yeah.
you're missing
He's
out
holding out
by
on you.
not. And he only
Yeah.
told you not to do that because he knew how much you'd love it, and then you'd be like him if you ate it. And he's still trying to tell those lies, especially related to sex. It's like, why would you
yeah,
really wait? Because you're going to wait, and God's probably
Then
going
you
to
won't know.
give you
Yeah.
somebody that doesn't even ever want sex, and you will have waited. And now I'm not saying that God's going to automatically just, because I think a lot of couples do, they'll wait and they'll kind of make these unspoken deals with God,
Mhm.
like, God,
mm,
I'm going to try to do it right, but then my sex life's going to be amazing from day one all my life. And that's not real life. I mean,
yeah,
you're going to have
yeah,
struggles, you're going to have setbacks, no matter what your story's been.
Definitely. Yeah.
And that's just life. But when you do things God's way, you're giving yourself the best opportunity possible to just
mm,
experience all that God has for you.
Mhm.
And even if you've blown it in the past, when you choose right where you are to receive his grace and forgiveness and move forward doing things God's way, you're putting yourself in the best position to receive all that he has for you. And so you can't worry about those kind of things, because the
yeah,
truth
yeah,
is sex is going to be fun. There are going to be times that there are going to be seasons when you have to work through stuff together. There's going to be a learning curve, and every couple goes through some version of that. And even the learning can be fun if you guys will just keep a sense of humor and keep just trust
Yeah.
trust God. It's going to be good.
And I think too, I like how you mentioned learning. We can all learn. And we
yes,
can we can teach our spouse what we like. And I think don't do it in the moment. That's going to probably really backfire and not be a good moment for you. But I would
Well,
say
it's
date.
okay if you're liking something to be like,
Oh
hey,
yeah, I
I like
like it.
that. Yeah,
But if you
that's
don't like it, like I
Keep
mean,
going.
if something hurts, like say no.
right.
But like if it's just like, oh, this is so boring, don't say that in the moment. But like I think that if later on, you're by yourselves, you're having dinner or whatever, like you can talk about it and be like, hey, what do you think about our sex life? And what is it that you really like that I do? And what are some things like you really don't like that I do? Or even you could speak more in generalities, like what's something you want to try, or what's something that you just really like, where it's not really personalized, but it's like I feel like I really like this particular position, or I think
yeah,
it's really good to have those conversations. A lot of times people will say talking about sex is almost feels more intimate and more vulnerable than even the act itself. But I feel
yes,
like it's important for couples to talk about it, married couples, like we should have a gauge. We should talk about these things, and we should care if our partner is enjoying it or not. And so
Yeah.
I think it's important to have those conversations.
That's so good. Man, this conversation is mind blowing to me because I'm realizing that your sex life really reflects the health of your marriage.
Oh, that's so
Mhm.
good. Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
is
It
that
is.
is that accurate? Is that an
yeah,
accurate statement?
I think
for
it
sure.
I think it is. I think it is. It's like if if everything else is the healthier you get every other part of your marriage, the healthier your sex life's going to be for sure.
Agreed.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
healthier your sex
absolutely.
life is, other parts of your marriage, they're going
Will
to naturally
benefit. Yeah.
benefit as well. Your communication, your connection.
Yeah.
So yeah, and God wired it up that he wired sex up to be a real cornerstone of marriage. And so if we're neglecting that, then it's going to be shaky.
That's right.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
that's why I just love what you guys have been saying and what you guys are doing, especially on your podcast and in the conferences. And I think this is a much needed conversation. I think it needs to stop being like a taboo
Yeah.
conversation because really, I think a lot of marriages are suffering, with this topic. And they shouldn't because this is the coolest, funnest topic in the world. Like, why wouldn't we want to be talking about this?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know. It's like we need to, yeah, we need to see healthier, marriages and marriages that are hot in the bedroom.
Mhm.
One thing I want to say is like when I look at you two, your guys' countenance just glows,
Yeah.
and you can really see the love that you have for each other. I
Mhm.
watch
Thank
you guys
you.
on podcasts, and I'm like, man, like Dave really loves Ashley, and vice
I do
versa.
really love Ashley.
I really love you
You
too.
And I
guys
could
glow
just
too, though.
You do glow.
oh, thank you. We've been asking our podcast guests this question to everybody in this love month, but what would be some like what is the best marriage advice that you've ever received? I know you probably guys received a lot, but what's like
Yeah.
one good solid nugget that y'all can share with us?
You
You
wanna
want to
go?
go? Why don't you go first?
It's always hard for me to just pick one. Like I love lists and like I
Yes,
love
and
the
he's good at lists
like
too.
just this and this.
Yes.
Um, I would say, gosh, I mean, this is going to sound churchy, but it's just true. I really feel like that the closer you get to Jesus, the closer you're going to be to each other. Like
Hmm.
Ooh,
if
that's
you're really
good.
committed to like, all right, we're gonna build our life on God's word. We're gonna make him, the rock that we're building things on. That's what's
Yes.
gonna make a marriage that withstands any storms,
Yeah, yeah, and
because
you will
Yes.
have
you're
storms.
gonna have
You
storms.
will. Yeah.
Jesus said we would have storms, but if we have
Hmm.
a good foundation, then
Mm,
we'll survive the storm. And so just prioritize your faith,
Yeah.
doing life, doing community within a church home, making prayer and God's word a part of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Just all
come
those
on.
things.
I totally
Come
agree.
on.
Mhm.
And I
Love
would
that.
say, you know, in marriage, it's really never his problem or her problem. It's always our problem. And that's
So
Wow.
good.
that's
Good.
even if we brought the problem on ourselves, or if it's an illness or whatever it is, we need to make sure we face it together. And this doesn't mean there's not natural consequences for sin, like if it's a sin problem, but even if our spouse is has committed something, maybe even against us in our vows, we are going to get through it so much better when we surrender that to God, and we're quick to forgive, and then allow them to rebuild that trust and realize that it's
Yes.
our problem, and help them
Mm.
get the help that they
Mhm.
need.
So good.
Yeah. That
God,
is so good.
that was
That is so
really
good.
good.
Where can our listeners, how can they get in contact with you? Can you just share your website, social media, and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And first off, thank you guys for what you're doing,
Yes, thank
Richard and
you.
Brittany.
Well,
Your inspiration, your story, your ministry, your heart for helping others is we love what you're doing, and it's been an honor to digitally connect, and we hope to get to meet you guys in person
yes.
soon.
Likewise.
Thank you. So
Thank
for
you.
anyone that wants to connect with us, we're part of a ministry called XO Marriage that
Mhm.
has conferences and resources and a lot of stuff. You can find all that at X, the letter X, letter O, xomarriage.com. And then for Ashley and me, we host the Naked Marriage podcast, which you can get
Yeah.
anywhere you get your podcasts. And then we're also uh, doing a lot, Ashley, especially on our shared Instagram page, which is at Dave and Ashley Willis. So any of those
Mm.
places would be a good starting point.
Mhm.
And we'll be sure to link all of that in the descriptions below. You guys, I know that I said that Dave and Ashley are the sexperts, which I still believe they are because they are amazing. But please check out their podcast
Yes.
because they are a wealth of wisdom.
Mm,
I mean, your marriage will get so much better listening to them.
absolutely.
They are some of our heroes, our marriage heroes. We absolutely love them, and we know that you guys will too. So make sure to check out the Naked Marriage podcast on YouTube and any other major podcast platform. Ashley, Dave, thank you guys so much for
Guys are
joining us. We're
awesome.
so
Thanks,
grateful.
friend.
We love you guys.
Oh,
And
thank you all
thank you
so much.
so much for tuning in to the Let's Talk Purity podcast. We'll see you guys not next week, but the week after. Because of a virus that attacked and hurt the world, we put much emphasis on washing our hands. But I'm here to tell you that there is a spiritual virus, and it is attacking marriages, families, and young adults, and it's called impurities. In 2020, the world asked us to wash our hands, but God is also calling us to have clean hearts.
The word purity means freedom from contamination. And in this book, we address things that contaminate our heart, such as lust, unforgiveness, bitterness, insecurities, idolatry, pornography, amongst other contaminations, and how to get free from them.
And that's exactly why we wrote this book, A Call to Purity, because God is calling us to be pure.
You see, when you walk in purity, you walk in freedom. And friends, this book is just not a book. It's a mandate from God, and God is calling us to rise up and walk in purity.